Summer camp was one of the highlights of my childhood. In 2010, I eagerly signed up for Camp Ernst, an adventure my parents arranged. Thankfully, my best friend Keith joined too, easing my nerves about being surrounded by strangers. Camp Ernst embodied the quintessential summer camp setting, reminiscent of those old horror movies. There were 2 large cabins for boys and girls respectively, a central lodge housing activity centers, dining halls, and various amenities, along with scattered smaller buildings across the campgrounds. Keith and I always stayed up later than the other kids, engrossed in our Nintendo DS games. That night, well past 2 a.m., we were still glued to our screens. Suddenly, the cabin door creaked open, prompting us to hastily stash our DS consoles under our pillows and feign sleep. Footsteps traversed the room, pausing briefly by my bed, where I felt the unsettling sensation of someone breathing down my neck. The footsteps then receded towards the door, which shut quietly behind them. I whispered to Keith, "That was creepy, especially feeling someone breathe on me." Returning to our game, I received a text on my phone from an unknown number, chiding us for being awake past bedtime. We were provided a list of camp counselor numbers for emergencies, but this one didn't match any we knew. I texted back, asking who it was, but received no reply. Sharing the eerie encounter with Keith, who lacked a phone, only heightened our unease. Surely we assumed it must be a counselor. Dimming our DS screens, we resumed our game. Minutes later, the back door of the cabin creaked open. Exchanging alarmed glances, we once again concealed our consoles. Yet, this time, no footsteps followed. My phone vibrated with another message from the same mysterious number, claiming to be Counselor Tony, urging us to meet behind the cabin for a chat. Keith and I exchanged worried looks. It sounded too suspicious. Venturing cautiously towards the back door, I peered out but saw no one. As I approached, I noticed a section of the wall had collapsed, revealing a figure hiding outside. Drawing closer, I realized it wasn't a counselor, but a creepy old man. With a scream for help, I bolted back to my bed, rousing everyone. As I cried out, the back door slammed shut. A counselor burst in through the front, and I recounted the ordeal. They swiftly organized a search, but the intruder had vanished. The incident haunted me, particularly the mystery of how he obtained my phone number and recognized me. Perhaps a security breach or leaked information was to blame. To this day, I still ponder those unanswered questions, occasionally revisiting the unsettling memory. At just 13, it was my first and last summer camp experience. I am just an ordinary teenager who goes to a traditional summer camp every year to spend the whole summer. The place has some 13 to 16-year-olds, and there's an elderly woman with a long history who works there as a staff member. But one time, something happened that was beyond belief, something that I still can't forget. It was one of those nights where my brain refused to let me sleep. I tossed and turned in bed, but the crib was just as uncomfortable as the others. The light of the full moon flooded into the room, and the bright nightlight beamed in from every window. I wasn't sleepy at all, I just felt defeated. I sat up, rubbed my eyes, and when I opened them again, I noticed the light outside the window. The one directly opposite me was blocked, and I saw someone. It was an old woman dressed in red. I gasped as she blocked the light, and I saw that she was looking at me. When our eyes met, I felt a wave of panic wash over me. I turned to the side, pretending to be asleep, or perhaps just wanting to hide under the covers like a child. I lay there for a minute before daring to look out the window again, but she was gone. I breathed a sigh of relief, but something felt off. I raised my head and looked out the window, only 3 feet away from my crib. I saw the same old woman with the red hat staring straight down at me. Once again, I cowered under the blanket, consumed by fear. I didn't know how long I stayed like that before I eventually fell asleep. The next thing I remember, I was standing at one of the campgrounds, telling the adults about the woman with the red hat. They looked back at me, one of the ladies seeming uneasy, saying it sounded too creepy, just like Miss Graham had described. To this day, my heart still skips a beat. I don't know what I saw, if it was a real person's head in my window or if, by chance, it was Miss Graham there. I'll never forget the time I went overnight camping in Pennsylvania. I was just a kid then, very shy and dreading meeting all the other kids at school. The first day of orientation was terrible for me. I would have rather stayed at home playing Super Nintendo or doing something else. The other kids' friends were beautiful, and soon I thought I wouldn't make any friends. But luckily, there were some real friendships formed.